Welcome to this bonus module of the Freedom Ticket. Today I've got my good buddy, an expert in the shipping, Steve Simonson, with me. How you doing, Steve?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
No problem. I just wanted to, add this little bonus module to the Freedom Ticket for you guys because Steve is an expert at bringing in shipments. He's been doing this for, I think, decades, bringing in, hundreds and hundreds of containers a year. And he's got a lot of experience in dealing with China and in protecting yourself. People are always worried about when they place an order, do they have any kind of legal recourse, or is there anything they can do to protect themselves if something goes awry? And Steve has got a great little presentation here he's going to make for you to show you how you can properly prepare an order for your Chinese factories to help give you some more protection and to make it more legally binding. And then you guys will be able to download. He's graciously provided us from his Empowery group a template of a purchase order, and that you guys can download here in this module and modify for your own purposes. But right now, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. He's got a short little presentation. He's going to talk about some of the points of how to properly do a purchase order.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate having me on here, and I am excited to share with my fellow entrepreneurs out there a very fun and easy way to make your purchasing with China easier. And I say fun in the most dry sense of the word, the accounting sense of the word, because it's really not that fun, but it is pretty easy to do. And our mission today is to illustrate how somebody can place a purchase order with China and still have that contract, as it were, enforceable in China. A lot of people are under the impression that you can't enforce a purchase order in China because we're a foreign company or whatever, but I'm going to share with you how to make it absolutely enforceable. So, as Kevin mentioned in the intro, we're going to provide you with this exact copy of a Chinese purchase order. And what that means is you're going to be able to use this exact format to place your own purchase orders, and this will give you the opportunity to make that an enforceable contract. So a couple very important points. The first thing, to get something enforceable in China, you have to show what's called a formal relationship. This means you have to write the stuff down. Now, most companies aren't big enough to have a full-on contract with a factory, although that is viable as well, as long as you follow these general rules. But at a minimum, you should have a contract that is your purchase order. And that means mailing a purchase order with all the specifications, everything written down, versus just emailing going, yes, send me 1,000 units of whatever you said. Those email strings are not enforceable. This formal purchase order is enforceable. This particular example is a contract that is governed by Chinese law. Now, you can make a different venue if you choose to have it enforceable somewhere else, but getting a foreign venue to be worked in China is almost impossible. So you need to stick with Chinese law. The third point there, as you see, is the governing language must also be in Chinese, which means any of the key requirements must be in the Chinese characters. And without that, you will not have enforceability. And then, of course, one of the key factors is the jurisdiction in China should be in the local area that the factory operates. So if your factory is down in the south, you may need to change the jurisdiction from the Zhejiang province that this PO is down to the lower province. But that jurisdiction is something that, at least inside of China, is quite enforceable. And then fundamentally, this is one mistake I see a lot of folks make. They'll use this PO, but they forget to copy and paste the name of the factory in Chinese characters into the purchase order. And that's a big one, because without that factory name being in the Chinese characters, it will not be enforceable. So you can see on the purchase order, it's the normal things: seller name, this should be in both English so you can understand it, as well as their official Chinese character name, address, phone, faxes, etc. I don't know who uses a fax yet, but it's still there. And you fill out all the information. For any important specifications, I want to highly recommend that you find the Chinese characters or the Chinese translation for that key specification, and you write it both in English and Chinese on there so there's no mistakes and there's no issues about it. So that's kind of the quick summary of the front end. Here's the back side of this same PO or purchase order contract. And all of these general contract clauses are, again, designed to help you and make this thing enforceable. So one of the key things about enforceability is the scope of the PO is defined, right? It's not an unlimited scope. It's basically, if it's written on this PO, it's enforceable. If it's not, and I'm thinking of you in visible specifications, then you're going to have a problem. And a key issue I see with especially newer sellers is they don't write down what they actually expect. They make assumptions. Please write it down if you want to get it. And then it's important to note that in any contract, both parties have rights and responsibilities. For example, if you don't pay, they are off the hook. That's one way they don't have to deal with it. But they are on the hook for quality and other things that are clearly defined in this purchase order. And again, driving this point home, lack of specifications hurts the buyers, that's you, much more than the factory. The factory loves to live in the gray area because when it comes back and you say, hey, these things are breaking, you go, well, the factory will often say, you didn't tell me you wanted this made a different way, and so it's really your problem. And I have to tell you, I agree with the factory. If you make assumptions, it's on you, not on them. Finally, other conditions, if you care to augment this contract, they can be added, but please be careful about what they are, and I would consult with a lawyer about that because you want to make sure that you don't run amok of the legal rules. And in this contract right here, the final clause is for binding arbitration. That means in the event of a dispute, the factory and you agree that whatever the arbitrator says will be the final word on it. And I will tell you that most of the time when you have this type of contract, it doesn't go all the way to arbitration because the Chinese factory understands that you are a sophisticated buyer because you're using a legal contract, and they don't want to lose an arbitration, so they much prefer to deal with you in an amicable and equitable basis. The point being that this is as much of a deterrent as it is a functional legal instrument, but it does work in both ways. It avoids problems, and in the event of a problem, it is enforceable in China. So that's kind of the very quick overview. Obviously, this is not a master class on purchasing from China, certainly not legal advice, but this is a easy way for you to upgrade your security in your supply chain by using a secure purchase order. And I hope that is helpful to each and every one of you in the Freedom Ticket.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. I just have a couple questions there on the Chinese. There's a lot of different dialects and different in China. Should it be in like simplified Chinese or Mandarin or Cantonese, or what do you recommend there?
So this is one of the most interesting things about China is the Chinese characters are actually readable in all of those languages. So Mandarin and Cantonese actually have the exact same characters, whether it's the simplified version of Pinting, I think, or Pinyang, I can't remember the name, or the full complex version. That's more of a font choice than anything. So really, as long as it's in Chinese characters, Mandarin, Cantonese, they can all read it. Shanghainese, Jiangsunese, all of them can read it, and that makes it enforceable throughout China in the language that they call Putonghua. That's Mandarin, but again, fundamentally, all of them can read it.
You said that it's important to have the jurisdiction there, so that's basically like the district or the state or a province or something in China. That's kind of what you were talking about, where you have to make sure that jurisdiction is where the factory is.
Yeah, exactly. Things like Sichuan and Hunan and Jiangsu, these are provinces within China, and that's the local jurisdiction that you want to make sure that's in the factory. And the arbitration that we've called down in the purchase order is for the Zhejiang province, but there are similar province and arbitration organizations in each province. All you have to do is look it up. And if you really have a challenge finding that, Google is your best friend, believe me.
Cool. And have you ever had to enforce one of these where you did one of these contracts and just things went awry and as a new seller or something, do they have to hire a Chinese lawyer to go and enforce this, or the factories, like you said, usually pretty amicable, and because this is in writing and it's kind of done official and shows that you kind of know what you're doing, you're not an amateur, that they'll usually work with you? Or have you ever had to take it to that next step?
Well, we've been around a long time, so we have definitely seen escalations, but I would say 90% of the time where the problem is relatively obvious and it's clearly a violation of the purchase order versus some nuanced issue that comes up later, then we've seen the most factories try to be proactive in solving it, which is very different than the normal Chinese approach, which is when you send a purchase order, the warranty ends when the taillights of that truck are out of sight. And so we think that this is mostly a deterrent, but we have in fact enforced on this type of purchase order and full contracts. And believe it or not, it is quite enforceable in China. I would say the Chinese courts are a little biased against foreign companies, but not so much that it is a complete waste of time. And it really all comes down to writing it down to begin with and making sure the expectations are clear. Factories, believe it or not, they really want your business long term. They don't want the problems. And if you tell them clearly what you want, they're more likely to give it to you.
You said something in the beginning, like an email chain is not enforceable, and that would be more like, hey, I need 1,000 of these. Okay, they're $5 a piece, and okay, ship them to this address. But it's okay to actually email. You don't have to fax or send this through the mail, the actual official purchase order. You can email that, and it's still good, right?
Yeah, very good point. So the email, it's that chain that you talked about that is informal, right? Hey, how much is the price of this? Hey, it's $5. Hey, go ahead and send me 1,000. Hey, go ahead and send me the money. That part of it is you're not going to have any luck in China enforcing that as a purchase order because it's not a formal contract. But sending via email your purchase order in that formalized form, and then them sending back the PI, that pro forma invoice, that process via email is no problem, highly enforceable. And again, they're going to put their signature and a Chinese stamp on the purchase order or at least the PI. And one critical thing is that the buyer, that's all of us, are responsible to make sure the PI matches the PO exactly. And any variations between those, the PI is going to win. So we want to make sure that they match up nicely in terms of specifications, etc.
And you said very specific is very important. Like you can't just say I need a blue. I want the mirror and to be a blue color. You need to say blue Pantone color 482 or whatever the number is. Like very down to the specific, down to like as specific as you can get. Correct?
Very correct, yes. So regardless of the type of product you do, you want to have a very objective way of measuring if it's right or not. So Pantone colors are a good example of, trying to hit an exact color. Or maybe the factory says, here's the material we're making this out of. You get the sample number from that factory and you write that down on the PO so that everybody agrees that it's that fabric number or that leather number. The types of metal can be specified. We even specify on some products the gloss level, believe it or not. Like it has to be 10-degree gloss level, and we have a gloss meter that checks it at inspection. So really be as precise as you can, but don't let that intimidate you. Just because you don't know it all on the first or second PO doesn't mean you won't learn and continue to make those better and iterate as you go. Nobody's an expert on the first day, and you learn as you go and you get better and better.
Awesome stuff, Steve. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge here and sharing the template for everybody to use. So I hope everybody this has helped you and given you some additional insight. And I guess we'll say thanks again, Steve, and we'll see you guys in the next module.